Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on with the project. It's called Harebrew. I will leave a link in the description to this repo on SourceHut, and I would like to submit this to the Hare project page and kind of work on it and make it a full kind of robust program. Now, if you click on my profile, here's my email address. If you need help, you can send me an email, and you might also want to grab this Hare tutorial repo because inside of here we're going to be using the path module, and I have a couple of examples of how to use kind of its most basic functionality. So let me go ahead and close that. And now I was working through this book here, System Programming in Go. Now I really like Go. I guess who doesn't, right? At least a little bit. Ken Thompson, Rob Pike. And in any case, it gives you a couple of examples of kind of how to use this. And so let me go ahead and close this. And that got me thinking about this. It got me to look into this module. It's the path module in the Hare Standard Library. And you see it's file system path, normalization, and manipulation. And it gives you a couple of examples of how to allocate this. Now we are going to be using a stack allocation, but when I do my actual Harebrew project, I think statically allocated is probably going to be the way to go. So let's go ahead and jump into our project, and this is exactly where we left off from the last video. Now I am on complementary fast fetch. I'm on Arch Linux, so I did have to do an install because Saturday I recorded this entire video and the screen froze. Not my screen, but the OBS screen here. And apparently some people have that issue. And you know, I tried it. I tried running it. I was on Chimera Linux, which is musolibc, and it uses a FreeBSD, a port of the FreeBSD userland. And so there's just some quirks with those kind of distros like Alpine and Void and Chimera. Now, I prefer those, but I just need things to work. So I'm on Arch, and hopefully this will give me a little more determinism in my system, and, you know, a little better support because everything just kind of works. And so hopefully this will help by uh, I can get on a more consistent upload schedule for my videos. So this program might not be exactly the same. I didn't port this one over, but it's nearly exactly the same as where we left off. So if we go into our main.ha, this should be exactly what we have from the last video. And what we want to do is make this into an actual project with modules. Now you could put this all in just in the main file. That's fine. It's not that big of a program, but just for the purposes of this video. So what we need is we need to make a couple of directories. We need a file directory, a project directory, and then a templates directory. Now, inside of this file directory, this is considered a module within our project. So you see it's at the top level. This will be a module. This won't be. This is going to hold the licenses that we need for when we make a project and bootstrap it. It's going to actually copy the license into our comping file. Okay, because when I you see if I say man Harebrew. Oh, I didn't install it. Okay, so I actually don't have my actual Harebrew program installed on here. But we're going to make a man page so that you can see a manual page so that you can see all the licenses that you can use when you create a project. So first things first, let's start with the um, file creation function. You know how when you pass in, you say Harebrew and then the F option and then whatever file. So that's what we're going to work on. So inside of the file module, go ahead and create an init.ha. Init is a good name for something to initialize it. And what we want to do is, however you want to move this over is up to you. And we also need, inside of our file module, let's create an exec editor.ha, and this is where the function goes to execute our editor. And so however you want to copy this code over is up to you. And so I'm going to grab this exec editor function. Let me copy it. And it's going to go in file exec editor. Now there's nothing else that we need to change in this except we need to import the OSExec module. And if you are doing any error handling, which I should have done in this, then you need to import that as well, like if you're using FMT or something like that. I decided for the rest of this project, I'm not going to do error handling because it's going to make the code more verbose for us to look at on the screen, and it's also going to take more time to get through the video. Do your own error handling. And so this is the exec editor function. And now I want to get this function, and this is the actual function that creates the file. So we named it create file. Let me copy this. And you want to put it in file init. Now there are some things, so here's the exec editor function that we're calling. And a quick note about that, we don't need to export that. Any function that's inside of this module is going to be visible to this function here, to whatever other file that's inside the same module. But we do need to export this create file function, and we are going to rename it init so that when we call this, it looks like file init. And you see how kind of intuitive that is. It's kind of self-explanatory about what it does. It initializes a file. Now, first things, we want to simplify this a little bit. So there's no need to pass in a reference to the command. What we can do is we can just make this a string, and we'll say file name, and we'll make it of type string. So now we don't need to get this anymore, okay? And we can just pass this in as a file name. Now here is the strings concat function, and what we're doing is we are appending the .ha extension onto the file name. So this is a dynamic allocation, and we want to refactor this. Now in this program, in this function, it's probably fine to do this, but I want to try and avoid static allocations. And so what I want to use is let me go ahead and pull up the documentation for what we want to use is the path module. And we are going to allocate this statically. And so this gives us a basic idea of how to use this. So let's look at path init. And you see it initializes a new path buffer. It takes a string argument and it can return an error, and it returns us a path buffer. So let's go ahead and create that, and we'll call it buff path init, and what we want to initialize is file name, and it does return an error. So now if I were to print this out right now, it would just print whatever file name that we pass to this. So we're initializing our path buffer. Now what I think would be really nice, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to think about this, is you see the buffer object includes an array of length max, which can be somewhat large. On Linux, it's about 4,000 bytes. So that's, given the size of your stack, the default stack size on Linux is like 8 megabytes. And of course, you can change that. But that's nothing, right? that's almost nothing compared to the overall scheme of things. So it's um, 4K, and that's nothing really. So that's manageable. So we're initializing our path, and now what we want to do is we need to append this .ha extension onto it. Now there's two ways that we could do this. Okay, we could use there's a push function to push a to push something on the end of the path, and then there is also path push ext. Now what this will do, it adds an extension to our path, and we don't have to include the dot separator. So what we could actually do here when we initialize this is we could say like this, and that will, oh no, I'm sorry, no we can't, because then it would have a separator here. So what we have to do here is, use this, we're going to use this pushext function and basically append the .ha extension onto this path. And so we want to say path push ext, and it takes a pointer, takes a reference to the buffer, and then whatever extension that you want to append. And so what we would say is a reference to the buffer, and then just .ha, because it appends the dot, it puts the dot on it for us, so we don't need to do that. And so now we can get rid of this entire dynamic allocation where we are appending the string. Now, when we, in order to get this, we can't say file name. What we would have to say is path string, and then it takes a reference to the buffer. And that's going to reference this buffer here, which now has the file name, and we've used pushext to append the extension. And also down here, we need to replace this here as well. So we would say path string, and then it takes a reference to a buffer. Let me show you that function. You see it returns a current path stored in this buffer, and it returns a string. And you can see the return value is borrowed from the buffer. So this is going to give us this right here at this point. When we push this ext, it's the file name, and it appends the .ha extension. And I'm just using this so that I can demonstrate the use of the path module to you, and also to avoid dynamic allocation. Now what we also need here, you see I'm using main string, and so we're going to need a couple of imports, as well as we need the main string. So let's go ahead and make that here. And this is what's going to get put into our file. If you want to put something in here, like a simple hello world or something like that. I was thinking of something, for quite a while I've been thinking of something that could be Hare specific. Like C has classic hello world from, Kernahan and Ritchie's classic, C book. I think Zig has like all your code are belong to us, when you initialize a project. And so I was thinking something specific to Hare, and what I kind of settled on was a quote from the Hare and the March Hare in Alice in Wonderland, but they don't really have any memorable quotes. And so I kind of settled on one from the Mad Hatter. And so, anyways, I don't know, kind of ridiculous maybe, but that's just the best I can think of at the moment. So Okay, so here's our main string that we are going to, when we create this file, we are using the fmtfprint function to actually write this to the file. fmtio and os. Okay, so let me go ahead and create those. So fmtio path and os, and I think that should be it. So let's go ahead and save this. And what we want to do now is, I will do this in a moment. I'm trying to um, keep this in case I make any mistakes, I can just revert back. So let's work on the main function, and we can delete all of this from the main function. And what we want to do here when we call the F option now is call file init, and we're going to pass in opt1 because that's going to be the string argument right here. So here is the rune argument we're switching on, and then here is the string that we want to get. So pass in opt1, and that's a string, and it will get passed into file init as the string argument that we pass in the command line. Now at the top of the file, I think I can get rid of strings, osexec for sure. We need getopt. I think I can get rid of fs, and I think fmt. Let me look. Okay, so we're using file I need to import, getopt, and os. So, okay, so far it's just these. Now, what I like to do is I say standard lib, and that way you know what's local, and what comes from the standard library. So you could just give a quick comment. So make sure that you import file, and everything looks pretty good to go ahead and run right now. So let me save this, and let's try make. Okay, where are we at? Looks like file exec editor. I don't think okay, that would be helpful if I use the use keyword, huh? Okay, I need fs. And so it looks like I was missing the fs module in the file init file. Okay, so now let's try this. Okay, so Harebrew, let's pass in the h flag. And again, don't pass in main if you're testing this in the same function. If you pass in main right now, it's going to truncate your file. So let's say Harebrew, and let's just say random file, and it works. So we have random file.ha. You see I'm in my editor. I'm in Helix right now, and let me unset my editor and remove this file. And now let's run this again, and I'll just say 1. And so I think I'm in Vim right now. It should be, I did say VI, but maybe it's like an alias or something, but I'm in Vim right now. And so I could say print line and then something. Hello from Hare. Okay, you get the point, right? So that works. And so now let's go ahead and, okay, so I'm just trying to keep this to where I can, if I mess up, I can just revert back quickly. So now let's go ahead, and what we want to do is work inside of our project module. And what we actually want to do is, what you can do is, what you want to do is, you want to export Harebrew data, and you want to export that as whatever this templates directory is. So right here, okay, so let me cd in the templates, and this is what we want for our templates directory. Now, of course, when we actually go to make the makefile and install this, this is not going to be the location, but just for now, okay, so that we can test this. Go ahead and export Harebrew data and make it be whatever your templates directory is, because this is where the licenses are going to go, and we need to be able to copy them into our project. Okay, so export Harebrew data, but we are going to hard code the path in as well. Okay, so let me cd back up, and what you want to do is you want to grab a couple of licenses. So let's do that real quick. Let's grab one, okay, and let me pull up my browser, and let's go to gnu.org, and we'll say licenses, and let's just grab the GPL3, okay. There should be. It's really, they don't do a good job, I don't think, of being like, here's the quick little part that you put in your program. Okay, a quick guide, here's HTML, and I think, okay, how to use the GNU license for your own software. I will leave a link in the description to this, okay, because it has this part right here. Okay, this is what you want. You see the license notice. So grab this and copy this. And we want this, I'm inside of the templates directory, you can see. Let's call this gpl3.txt and go ahead and paste this in. Okay, so now here's our GPL license, okay? So here's our GPL3. So that's in gpl3.txt inside our templates directory. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to default our project. So when you say Harebrew and you go to make a project, right? Let's just call it random. And then you can pass in an L flag, and you could say like a GPL, or if you don't pass in the L flag, it defaults to GPL3. Okay, so you always want defaults on things in case someone doesn't use it, because if someone can misuse something, not on purpose, I'm saying, but accidentally, then that's probably going to happen. So you want to try and handle kind of all edge cases that you can. And so for the moment, let's go ahead and work in our main function, our main file, and we want to make now we can get rid of this, okay, we can get rid of this string. What we want to do is we want to make a struct, and we'll call it config, and we're going to make some flags to say whether or not someone has entered the project flag and the license flag. So we'll just call it L, and it'll be a Boolean, and then P for project, and this will be a Boolean as well. And what we're going to do is set these, if someone uses the project flag or the license flag, we're going to set these to true so that we can do some logic and run the appropriate code. And then we want a name, which is going to be the name of our project, so it's a string, str, and then we also want a license of type str as well. And you can have a trailing comma on the end of your structs. So right here, let's go ahead and initialize a struct, and we'll call it config, and we are just going to default initialize everything with this struct initialization syntax. And now we need to work on our proper cases, and we'll say the p flag. Let's do L first. It comes in order, so why not? And then if someone passes in the L flag, we want to set config L to true. And then also what we want to do is, okay, there's going to be some more logic here. I think P should probably come first because that's the main flag. So let's just do that. And we'll say config P is true equals true. So now these flags are true, you see, in our config struct if someone enters these. And if someone says, okay, so that's true, and then we set config name to, it's going to be opt1. You see, because we're switching on everything. And remember this right here, this ops slice, this is a slice, and so we're iterating through it, and then we're getting this rune value right here. And so now opt1, when we iterate through this ops struct opt0 is this first rune value. It's whatever your flag is. And then opt1, because this is a tuple, right? Here's the tuple. And then opt1 is going to be this string. And it's whatever someone passes in as a file or a license. Okay? And so now what we need to do is say config license equals opt1. Okay, now, if you're a more experienced programmer than I am, you know, you can probably find some better ways to do things. This is a bit of a learning experience for me, and hopefully for you as well. Okay, so now if someone enters the F flag, we are using file init and then passing in the string value to initialize the file. We tested that already, and it works. And if, okay, something's not highlighting correctly here, so there's something going on. Okay, I need a semicolon. And so if someone passes in the P flag, we're setting config P to true because we're going to do some logic down here and take the appropriate action. And then if someone enters the L flag, we'll set license to true and pass in the string value for that. Okay, so now outside of our for loop, now that we've grabbed these values, now if you set your config in here inside your for loop, it's only visible inside your for loop. So make sure that you initialize this struct before the for loop. And so what we want to do is some basic logic in order to set these, run the appropriate function. And we're going to be, just like we made file init, we're going to make project init to initialize a project. And we want to say something like if config L and not config P. So now what we're doing is we want to set a default name for our project. So like I said, if someone can misuse your program, it's probably going to happen. Again, not on purpose, just by accident. So if someone passes in the L flag, but they don't pass in the P flag for a project, we want to set config name to, and we're going to set a default name. So we'll say Hare project. And then now we want to run our project init. Now remember, we haven't created this yet. We will create this. And these are going to be two string values that we pass in. So it's config name and config license, because we need both of these to initialize the project. And now what we want to say is if config p. So this is like the main, this is like the main logic, I guess you could say. And we always want this to run, but if we're going to say if not config p, excuse me, config l, you don't want to and this here like this, okay? Because you want this to run. Someone can pass in just the p flag and not the l flag. Okay, so you want this to run regardless. So we'll say and not config l, and that means they didn't pass in a license. What we're going to do is config license is going to be GPL3. And I'll show you how we're going to handle that. We're going to pull this from that templates directory, and now this is the default license that's going to be used if someone creates a project. And then what we want to say is, okay, so if config p and if not config l, it's going to set it. And so then we call project init, and then pass in config name and config license. Now what we could do, I mean, you could pass in a reference to this struct, but then you'd have to define it in a module, and now your project module would be dependent on that struct, and it's just easier to pass in a string, and that way this project module has no local dependencies. And then what we want to say is os exit. Now let's look at os exit, and you can see this is just like saying return whatever in C, so return 0, return 1, whatever. And so it's exit the program with the provided status code, and you see it takes a status, so that would be an OS status, and it's an enum, so you can say 0 for success or 1 for failure, or you can actually just put in the enum itself, which I like explicitness in code, so that's why I always say either success or failure. So OS status success. And this looks pretty good. So far, I think we're pretty much done with the main function logic. I need to make sure that I am using, let's go ahead and import our project module at the top level of our file. And let me just double check everything here. Okay, I am missing this. That's a big one. So let's go ahead and put in the logic for our getOptParse function, and we need a p flag, and then we'll say project, and then I'll say create a Hare project, and then we also need the L flag, and I'll say license, and I'll say specify a license. Okay, so that looks good. Defer getOpt finish, we're initializing our struct. Okay, file. Okay, that looks good. Printing the help message. Okay, if config L and not config P, we're setting the project name to Hare project, and then calling project init, and if config P, and then if not config L, we are specifying a GPL3 license, and then calling project init, passing in the name of our project and the license. Okay, so this is good. Let's go ahead and let me save this, and let me just make sure it will compile. Missing dependency project, and I think that's because, yeah, that's because there's nothing in there. Okay, so inside of project, we need to create init.ha. We might have done this already. And so let's go ahead and work on this. So open project init.ha, and now this is where the code to initialize our project is going to go. So let's go ahead and start prototyping this out. we need to export this function, and it's going to be named init, and we'll say initialize as a Hare project, and it's going to take a, we'll call it project, and it'll be a string. That's the project name that we pass in, and then a license, and that's also a string. And okay, so now what we need to do, what we're going to do is, this is where the path module is really going to come in handy. The first example that I showed inside of the file, that's kind of a trivial, a trivial use of it. This is going to be much, this is like an actual proper use of the path module. So we have our project and we have our license. And so what we need to do, there are a couple of um, directories and then files that we're going to need to create. So I'll say, so first let's have the files. Okay, so we'll say files equals, and there's going to be copying, and then we need a makefile, and then a readme.md, and then we also need directories. So I'll say const dirs, and the directories we need are cmd and then doc. And remember, inside of cmd is where your main file goes. Inside of the doc directory is where our manual page is going to go. So let me just get some visual stuff going on here. Files, okay. So now what we need to do is we need to make a for loop, and I'll say let dir and dirs, and now we're going to loop through this and create a file, our directories. Now, if you look at the I don't have it pulled up here, but if you go through my git commit history for Harebrew, my first couple iterations of this program were absolutely atrocious. And I was like creating every single directory by itself, allocating on the heap, and all kinds of things like that. And over time, I found ways to improve it bit by bit. So every time I open up this program in the text editor, I'm trying to improve something about it. So just know that this function that we're about to build out, this is not the first function I created, right? This is after a couple iterations on this and looking at the logic and to see how I can try and simplify it, right? Because there's a general principle in programming called DRY, don't repeat yourself. And that's generally true. You can break that sometimes, but it's generally true, okay? And what I mean is, I was handling all the files and directories by themselves, and appending dynamically on the heap, and it just got to be a little much, to be honest. So what we want to do is we want to use the path buffer again. So let me say, I think it's path init, and this initializes a new path buffer. And when I go to build, I'm going to refactor my Harebrew project to do this statically. But at the moment, we are just going to make this static on the heap. And what we want to do is just to make sure that everything is running correctly, let's we'll say path init project, and then what we want to do is okay, so we need a directory also, and let's say path string, and then a reference to the buffer. And then we're basically going to be doing the same exact thing here. So let me paste this, and I'll say for file in files, and okay, that should be correct. And you see we're initializing another buffer here, so this will go out of scope here, and this buffer will be cleaned up, and then I'm initializing another one, and that's why I'm saying a static allocation is probably going to be better. And what we're just doing, I'm just printing these for now, right? When you iterate on a program and when you build your programs, you don't want to get too far into it before you test it out, and that way you can catch any mistakes that you're making earlier on. So let me make this. Okay, so I have a syntax error, and let's see, 13. Okay, I need a semicolon here, and I definitely need one here. I need an error assertion operator. And so basically what I'm just doing, when I enter the and in fact, let's also print the license. And I'll license. So let's also print the license. And so I'm just printing these here just to make sure that everything is working with the logic that we have so far. So, okay, I need imports. Excuse me, sorry. I imported hardly anything. Okay, so FMT for sure. And I think that's it right now. FMT and the path module. Okay, so cannot call non-function type. So that is in our main. That is in our main file. Let me double check everything. File, project, and that's right here. I'm missing a comma. Okay. These simple little things will always get you. Okay, so it built just fine. Let me pass in the H flag. And now you see it's listing these. We can pass in a project or a license. So let's say Harebrew, and I'll call it random project. And the license, I'll say, let's leave it blank and see if it correctly puts in a GPL3. Okay, so I named it random project. That's good. So you see how it's appending our path separator. So here's our two directories, and then the three files that we need, and then here's the license, GPL3. So it does indeed pass in the GPL3 license by default. Let's just pass in remember how you can just pass in a license flag, and it will create a default project name. Let's try that. And you see it does indeed work. So we're creating Hare project. That's going to be the name of our project if someone does not enter a default project name. Okay, so now that we have that working, what we want to do is go ahead and finish building this out. And I can remove this. We are initializing this. And now what we want to do is and I do have I have some little kittens in here with me, and they are being a bit rambunctious. And so we want to use the makeDirs function and create our directories here. So we'll call that here. And remember, I'm not doing any error handling, okay? And we want to pass in path string, and that's reference to the buffer. And here we need the general permissions on a directory are 755 in octal format. So this is going to create these two directories inside of our project directory. Now, if you notice, you might notice that I haven't actually created the top level directory. When I first did this, inside of here, I was saying make dir and then calling project and making just a project directory. But if you notice, as I said, I try and iterate on this every time I open up the text editor. You see the make dir, so there's the make dir function and make dir s, right? Make dirs, and you see creates a directory and all non-extant directories in its path. So when we call this here, it's going to create, when we create this first directory, it's going to create our top level project directory, okay? And so now we're creating the directories, and what we want to say is if dir is cmd, because this is where we want to put we have to create our subdirectory and then our main file, okay? And so now what we want to do is make another directory. I need to push something onto the path. What I need is, it's going to be the project again, because you have cmd and then your project subdir, and then your main function goes inside of there. And so now right here is where we want to, and I need to make the directory, and you can just say make dir for this one. Path string, it takes a reference to the buffer, and 755. Okay, so we're making that directory. And now what I want to do is I want to push on, and I want to use this ext, and it takes a reference to the buffer. Okay, hold on, let me look at this. Okay, so it takes a reference to the buffer, and then what we're pushing on, that's right. Okay, so a reference to the buffer, and I want to push on the .ha extension, because here's where we're going to create our main file. So let's call os create, and remember, I'm not doing any error handling, okay? Just to make so you can see more of the code, and I can get through this project a little bit faster. But again, if you reference the Harebrew project in my repo, it has all of the error handling. And what we want to create, we say path string, because that contains the string, and then it's 644 is the standard permissions, and then this is going to create main.ha. Now, I know it's kind of, you shouldn't repeat yourself, but I don't want these modules to have any dependencies, and so let's go ahead and create this here. And again, this is what's going to get written to our main function. So we're calling it main string, and okay, so now what we want to do is we want to use fmt fprint, and let me pull that up. And we are going to copy this string into our open file. So now we have main.ha open, okay? We have main.ha open, and I need to close this. I need to return a, let's call it fd for file descriptor. And so let's close fd. Okay, so we're deferring the close, and we need a handle and then main string. And that's going to write our main string to the main file. And that should be it for this section of the directory, this for loop for the directories. So now let me go ahead and save this. And I'm back in the top level. And let me try and compile this. And I am indeed missing some imports. So let's do, we need, okay, so we're using path, OS. I know I'm using IO. I'm using FMT. And that looks like it. Okay, so it built just fine. Let's pass in the H flag. And now let's say I'll just pass in the L flag. And okay, so it should actually create a Hare project. You see, here's the project that it just created. So let me cd into here. And we do indeed have our CMD directory and our docdir. And let's cd into CMD. This should be named Hare project. And you see we do indeed have a Hare project. And you see I need to work on, so I'm creating hareproject.ha instead of main.ha. Okay, so let me work on that a moment. I obviously got the logic a little bit incorrect. So we're creating this, and I'm pushing this onto the path. Okay, so you know what I can say here? Instead of pushing this ext, what I can say instead is just main.ha. And that's going to path push, and I'm appending the .ha manually. So, okay, now let me try with the H flag. Okay, now let me try Harebrew, and I'll just say random. Okay, so that printed just fine. I should have a project named random. Let's cd into here. And under CMD, we should have a random directory. And then inside of random, we should have our main.ha. And if I open it in the text editor, you can see it has some basic scaffolding. So that's good. Everything is working just fine. Everything is working just fine so far. So let me clean this up and then remove this directory, and then whoops. Okay, so everything is good so far. So now what we need to do is we need to work on the code in order to make these files. So let me remove this printline statement. We are initializing this path buffer with the project and then the file. And so now all we have to do here is create each one of these files. So I will call it, I'll use fd again, and os create, and we need a path string, and as well as the permissions. And now what I want to do, so these are being created here, and hold on 1 second, please. Okay, sorry about that. So these are being created here, and let me defer IO close. Okay, so that's going to close this, and what we want to say is if, what's it going to be? If file equals copying, because now what we want to do is here is where we are going to grab that templates file, right, our license file from our templates directory, and actually copy it into this file here. Okay, so what we need to do first of all is let's call it so there's a couple ways we can do this. Okay, we can okay, so what I want to do, I think this is the way I did it in my Harebrew project. I'll call it templates dir, and we are going to name it, you want to hard code the value wherever your templates directory is. That's where what you want this value to be. So we'll say templates dir. Now I did set it as an environment variable, and the way that I'm going to set up the actual project is you can override this when you compile it. Okay, so now what we'll say is then we need to get this we need to get this environment variable. So I'm just going to call it the data directory, and we need Harebrew data. And actually, let's match on this, because if if the environment variable is not returned, so we'll say caselet s. This will be, we'll call it, actually it's void. If let's handle void first. And if it returns void, I'm going to say yield templates dir, and that's the hard-coded value. Okay. Now, if we actually get the environment variable, which will be a string, okay, then let's yield this. So either way, if Harebrew data is not set in your shell, then we're going to say yield templates. And again, that's right here. So we're just hard coding this in. And again, if you're more experienced than I am, look, this is still just a bit of a learning project for me. And if you have any ideas for improvement on how I can do things, definitely feel free to put that in the comments. Okay, so now what we're doing is we are getting this environment variable, and what we want to do now, so now we have our templates directory. Okay, and that's inside of this um, this variable named data dir. It holds a string value, and it's either hard coded or it's getting it from from our um, from our shell, from our environment variable. But either way, it's going to be the same thing. You want it to be the templates directory that we're using for our project. Now again, when you go to install this, I'll show you exactly where to install this using the um, file system hierarchy documentation. So now that this is a string value, I need a little bit of a string value of templates dir. Okay, so now I can kind of reason about what's going on in my code. And so now what we want to do is append the file and extension. And then what we need to do is open data file. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to use path push, and it takes a reference to the buffer, and we want to push on the wait a minute, no. Okay, no, that's not correct. I might need to look at my actual project to remember what I did here. Okay, actually, okay, that's right. What we need to do is we need to make a new buffer, and we'll call it a license buffer, and let's use path init. And what we are initializing this to is our data directory. Okay, so now this holds our data directory, and if I were to print this out in string format, it would print out this templates directory value, or whatever we have Harebrew data set, which this should be the templates directory of our project. Okay, so that's what it holds right now. And what I want to do is push onto it the license. So okay, so it's license. And now this is going to hold, right, whatever license. If I come back up here, you see we're passing in license to this, to our init function. The cat is going crazy. I hope that didn't just set a bunch of static and stuff off in the microphone. Okay, so now we're pushing the license, and now what we need is and now let's push on the ext. And we actually want to push on the txt extension. Okay, so now what this holds inside of this license buffer is the full entire path to our license file. Okay, now we need to open this for reading because we need to open it and then copy this into our copying file. Okay, which is still open, right? We created it here. Okay, it has a FD, so our copying file is still open on this loop iteration. And so now what we want to do is open this. And let me call this, I'll call it, let's see, I already named, okay, that's data dir. Let's name it data file. Okay, and OS open. And it takes a string argument, so it's going to be this whole entire license buffer. So we say path string, and then we pass in a reference to the license buffer. And let me just, I think it just takes a string value. Okay, and it's open in read-only by default. Again, remember, I'm not doing error handling right now, just to simplify everything. So now at this point, okay, open license file for reading. So at this point, our license file is open. And now what we want to do is use IOCopy and pass, it takes two handles. It takes a dest and then a source. Okay, so the destination is going to be FD, right? Because that's the name of the file descriptor for whatever is open. And again, remember, this is an if statement. So this is only going to run if the file is copying. And so we want to pass in the file descriptor right here for copying. And I think it's dest and then source. That's pretty common. Okay, yes, destination first and then source. That's a generally good programming idiom to follow. And the source that we want to copy it from is called data file. You see, because I'm opening that here, here's the file descriptor that now holds our open license file. Okay, and then we're copying that, and let me defer IO close and data file. Okay, and copying the data over. Let me just comment this. I'll say copy license data to copying. Okay, now that should be, I think that's it. So this should create our whole entire project. And now there's more that I want to do with this, right? I want to eventually like bootstrap the make file just a little bit, right? Probably not the README, because that's pretty custom. But I would eventually like to bootstrap the make file just a little bit, add some basic scaffolding code in there. And then I also want to make this to where you can make a module project. But that should be it for now. Let's just double check this, okay, and look at our logic here for our files part. So we have our array that contains all of our files. We are looping through with a for statement. We are initializing this path buffer, creating each file. And then if the file is copying, we are getting this templates directory, which when we go to install this with the make file, this is going to live inside of your USR, your user directory. And I'll show you that in the file system hierarchy documentation. And then we are initializing a license buffer, pushing on the license, as well as extending the txt, appending the txt extension, opening that file, which what this is opening right now is the file inside of our templates directory, okay, that we are currently working in. But again, when this gets installed, this is going to be a different directory. This is just so that we can build the program. And then we are copying the data from the license into our copying file. And at the moment, we should just have, I just have one license. If you want to put a couple of other things in here, that's fine. So let me try and build this. Okay, path push license, unknown object, IO close. Okay, so two things. Okay, so for path push, I think I need a reference to the buffer first, and then the defer IO close is just a simple typo. So project init. Okay, let's check this out. And so what I need to do first is have a reference to the buffer and its license buff. Okay, and then right here, that's just a typo. Okay. Okay, so it compiled just fine. Let's pass in the H flag, and now let's create a project. Let's call it I'll pass in the P flag, and I won't pass in the license flag, and so it's going to default to GPL3, which is the only license that I currently have in my templates directory. And I don't know. Let's call it random again. And it looks like it's having a problem opening this file. So let me make sure I named it correctly. Okay, so GPL3TXT, and it looks like it's having a problem opening this. Let me build it manually. Hare run, and then it's main, and then let's pass in the P flag. Okay, so it's having a hard time creating this directory. Okay, so let's check this out because I'm not doing something correctly here. It should be, it's this right here. Okay, so I am initializing a new path and then pushing on the project to the end of the path if CMD, and then I'm pushing on project again because it has to be your project and then CMD and then the sub project. Okay, OS make their path string. It's a buffer. Yeah, I honestly don't understand why this isn't working. That should be working. Use OS, use path, use IO. Yeah, it's right here. But you see, we already tested this, so I'm not understanding why this isn't working. It might be something here. I don't want to waste your time with debugging this, so I'm going to probably cut this out of the video. But once I figure it out, I'll let you know. Okay, so I found the problem, and it's going to be this right here. I needed to say license buff, and I was just saying a reference to the buff, which is the previous one. It's not even, it's this one right here. So that was the problem. Okay, so now we should be good to go. Let me clean this up, and let me remove all of these other little projects I created. Okay, so now let me make this. It should build just fine. I'll pass in the H flag. Okay, so now let me, now let's make a Harebrew project named hello. And if I cd into here, what did I do? oops, wrong command. And if I cd into here, okay, now we have our whole entire program bootstrapped. We have the cmd directory, which is where our subdir in the main file goes. Here's our doc directory for our manual page, copying, makefile, and readme. And let me go ahead and cat copying, and you see it properly copied over the GPL3 license um, from our templates directory. And so this is a basic functioning program. If I cd into cmd, and this should be main. Excuse me. Okay, so we have the subdirectory, and then cat main. We have our our main function. And so this is a full file, and what I'd like to do eventually is bootstrap a basic makefile, right? So like then you can have right, and then I could bootstrap this a little bit with with um with the basic scaffolding, right? And enough to where when you run make, it's going to like your all target would be whatever your program is. So this would be hello, right? And then hello would be, you would say Hare build, say hello, and then it's going to be cmd hello main.ha. So you see, it would be like that. And there's probably some more that I could do, right? Where are we at? CMD, and there's probably some more that I could do in order to, and so that you, cannot have an empty block. So that's the problem. That's the only problem is that, you cannot have an empty main function, right? So let me just put in, and now it'll make. So, so eventually that's what I want to do is have this program to where it bootstraps an entire project for you and kind of gets you going, right? And this is how you learn things. Just find something that you want to build that's kind of interesting to you. I personally I like command line programs. I like dealing with files and directories and things like that. Um, so I don't know. It's just kind of an idea I had, because the first iteration of this program I made a long time ago, I just called it Hare Make, and it just bootstrapped a basic file for you. Um, and then I was looking through the thesaurus, and I was like, what can I call instead of Hare Make? Because I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know, not ridiculous, but I wanted kind of a better name that kind of rolled off the tongue. And then I got to thinking about Homebrew, right, which is the package manager for Mac OS. And I was like, you know what? What about Harebrew? I think that would work pretty good, right? So I just named it Harebrew, and I eventually want to put this on the Hare project page. And um, in my actual program, I'm still iterating on it, right? And I've added like you see I have the AGPL, Apache 2, BSD 2, BSD 3, GPL 2 and 3, the um, Mozilla public license, and so I want to put a bunch of different licenses in here, and so that when you create your project, right here's the the make file. You see, so when we go to install this, this is actually where it installs these templates to, and here's the file dir, and then templates, right? So we have our prefix, right, which is user local, and then share Harebrew, and then it gets installed into the templates directory. and I didn't install it directly in Harebrew because I'm trying to keep that clean because I think I want to make another separate subdirectory for like the make files, right? Because I want to turn this into something where you can make a binary project, right? Which would have like main.ha with a main function, or as well as like a module, so that you can make like a third party module that someone else can use. And so in the next project, we are in the next video, we're actually going to go through the we're going to go through and build out the make file. Okay, so here's the make file. And then we are also going to build the man page. Now, the manual page is built with um, scdoc. Okay, it generates man pages and it has its own markup format. And then you just run it through scdoc and it automatically creates a man page. So if I make this and I come into the man directory, the doc directory, and so you see here is the um, here's the scdoc markup, and then when you run it through scdoc, it it makes this, right. These are not that fun to write. I tried writing this by hand at first, and then the more I went through a lot of the Hare projects, I saw that they are just using scdoc, and that's the whole point of it, right? Is to reduce your workload and things like that. So this is what the actual syntax of a manual page actually looks like, and as you can see, it's not that fun to um, write, and so that's why we're going to write this in scdoc format. You can see it basically looks like markup, like regular, or excuse me, markdown. It's very simple. And so in the next video, we are going to build out the full make file, and we are also going to build out the manual page. So let me exit out of here. Okay, this is the okay, so let me commit this. Okay, and see, this way I can just keep my, if I make a mistake here, I don't have to redo the whole project. And so basically, right, I have my main branch, which is like the clean branch, obviously. And and this is where you work on everything and you can make all your mistakes and everything before you merge it into main. And so this way, this is going to help me make videos quicker, and especially this video, so that if I make a mistake, I can just revert back pretty easily. Okay, so let me see. That should be it for now. Um, Remember, my email address is on my profile for SourceHut, and um, that should be it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I really appreciate all of you watching, and I make these videos to hopefully be helpful. And like I said, I had to reinstall. I just went ahead and complimentary fast fetch. I'm back on Arch Linux because I want to get on a more consistent upload schedule, and I was just having some issues with Chimera Linux. I um, tried running the Flatpak version as well as the native version of OBS Studio, and when you run the native version, you have to like manually configure your codecs, um, and maybe it doesn't, you know, detect them properly. You have to try and get it to detect your codecs, and I just find OBS Studio to be sort of non-deterministic. It's really strange. I've been using it for over a year, and I've had the best experience on Arch Linux. And this is where everything just works, right? Now, my preferred distros are, like Alpine, Void, and Chimera, but, I only have so much time and bandwidth And so I don't have like the time and energy to be constantly tinkering with things, right? And so I just went back to Arch so that I can make more consistent videos. And so I'm hoping that this is going to help with that. Okay. So that's it for now. I really appreciate all of you watching, and I would appreciate if you did want to subscribe because I am going to continue to make videos. And where we go after this project, I'm not sure, but it's going to be we're going to continue to build projects and build our knowledge, right? Now, I would say this. You're going to learn more by sticking with one programming language than you are by constantly switching back and forth, right? I would say, even if it's just Python, as ridiculous as that might sound, the more projects and the more complicated projects you build out, the more knowledge you're going to gain. So don't constantly be switching languages. Stick with the language and or in general stick with the language. Of course, you can dabble in other ones and look at them and see what they do and this and that, but while you're learning, I would say try your best to stick with one language and try and build more complicated projects. That's how you learn things. So for that reason, I will probably stick with Hare. It's I would say I am most comfortable in Hare than any other language. But I'm also really over the past year or two I've spent some time in Go, and so I would like to probably build some Go projects as well. So, that should be it for now. I really appreciate all of you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video. We're going to build the makefile and the readme, and there might be a couple other little parts that we're going to do. So that's it for now. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.